Yes, we are now recording, so you are on.
Okay, all righty. I think when we did a practice session, there was some delay thanks to the internet in Eastern Shasta County, maybe Shasta County, everywhere. So if the conversation gets ahead of the picture, hold up your hand or something and we'll slow it down. This is the main attraction, obviously. This is Burney Falls. This photo was taken in the spring. The falls, this land altogether is the land of the Ajamawi Pit River people for hundreds of years. In the beginning of the 20th century, PG&E began, or power companies began building dams. And the McArthur family, who were ranchers in the Fall River Valley, purchased the land around the falls to protect it. They were very fearful that dams would erase the falls. There were some bumps in the road at getting the state of California to actually manage it, a fire in the 1920s. But since basically the mid 1920s, it has been part of the state park system. There are three main ecologies at the park. Burney Falls and Burney Creek has a riparian forest that includes willow, ash, maple, alder. The creek is full of trout and pond turtles. And somewhat back from the creek itself, I'm sorry, stop there. And in addition to that, there are segments of the park that have an open forest of pine, oak, cedar, and fir. The understory has manzanita, deer bush, and mountain misery, and it's host to mule deer, coyote, gray foxes, and gray squirrels. The third area is Lake Britton, and sometimes people who come to the park miss altogether the fact that there's a pretty good sized lake there. It is a dam. It's a dam on the Pit River itself. And the Lake Britton and the lagoon provide additional habitat for nesting waterfowl, eagles, osprey, and otter. The management of the reservoir creates fluctuations in the lake level like other managed water places, and that affects the vegetation in the lake and along the shores. Unfortunately, algae blooms are common during the late summer due to warmer water temperature, and I think the fact that the Pit River includes agricultural runoff from the Fall River Valley upstream. As Larry said, there are three main trails in the park. We walked them this spring and recorded the birds that we saw. The Falls Trail, maybe the cursor. Can you see the cursor?
Got it.
The Falls Loop Trail is a little over a mile. It's partly paved. Half the trail is shaded and really in the summertime a pleasure. It's misted by the fall and it's lush with creekside foliage. The trail then climbs out of the canyon of Burney Creek, but it never loses the sound of the creek. The second trail is the Cemetery Trail. It also is about a mile, and it passes a small pioneer cemetery that was done the early part of the year before the park. The trail is the only place in the park where bikes and dogs are allowed. And it is an open pine and oak area for most of the way. Forget whether I talk about this later, but the trail was the original road from Burney, basically up to Wairika, and it went down, and there was initially a ferry and later a kind of temporary bridge across the Pitt River. The third trail is around the Lake Britton area and the lagoon where Burney Creek runs into the lake. You can get there, it's a little over a mile on the rim trail from above the falls, or you can drive down to the lake, a short drive through the park. That area, of course, hosts water birds and the eagles and osprey that live on the water birds and the critters in the lake. The first group of birds we called parking lot birds, that we basically saw them not just in the parking lot, but every place in the park. Dark-eyed juncos, busy little sparrows. They're often seen foraging in small groups on the ground and in low shrubs and grasses looking for seeds. Stellar jays, like the coniferous and oak forests that thrive, they're loud, they're raucous, and they salute you on the trail with a harsh call. They can also rattle or shriek. They eat most things, and they're infamous for begging around the picnic area. Ravens are large, have a deep croaking call. They also are often found near human areas like campgrounds. They're adaptable, and as you know, they're curious. They like forest areas, but they'll linger near human activities. The Falls Loop Trail, as we said, the ecology of the falls themselves are unusual because of the unique geology. The springs that feed the falls run mostly underground from Mount Burney and the Cascade Peaks to the south of the park. So even when Burney Creek stops flowing above ground, the falls run year-round. This riparian zone, as we said, has alder, vine maple, dogwood. There are Douglas firs and incense cedars a bit away from the stream, and the stream itself is full of trout, frogs, mollusks, and pond turtles. The big deal and unusual bird that inhabits the falls are black swifts. They arrive toward the end of May. We did our walk in March. They nest in the crevices behind the falls. They spend virtually all of their time in the air. They have feet and legs that are unable to perch. They can't perch, they can only cling to the rocks behind the falls. They eat flying insects, and they go remarkably high, as you can see from that lower picture. And you also see them clinging to the rocks behind the falls. Once the young are able to fly, the swifts leave, and many of them winter in South America. I hope you can see this if you've got a good size. A visitor at the falls in 2019 spent the time identifying where the swifts were nesting. So those little kind of yellowy squares are where the swifts were nesting, and they go in behind the water and cling and deposit their eggs.
And if you come up to the falls, These are posted in the visitor center. So if they still are in the same nest, which I don't know if they do or not, you could be able to get a better picture of where to look.
As you see, they're along the side falls, not behind the main center fall.
So Catherine,
Yeah.
these so these images that that show where the birds are actually nesting behind the falls, these are posted in the visitor center?
Yes.
Yes.
That is very cool. Yeah. So because I've like I said, I've been up there several times, and I've seen only one swift fly into a nest site, and that's nice to know where the nest sites are, because they are so quick. It makes it much easier probably to see them as they approach the falls.
Yeah, when we were at the visitor center, I noticed that they have this big display wall of the falls. And I noticed and I asked our interpreter about it. So I took a picture so we could tell you to look for that when you come.
Great.
Obviously, we saw Canada geese, chin-strapped. They're monogamous. They can be seen along the lake, along the creek, in the lake, in the lagoon area. They migrate in, and there's a good reason that they're called honkers. Usually find them because you hear them. Mostly vegetarian, recognizable when flying by that honking. They aggressively defend their nests. At other times, they'll gather in groups. And on the beach at Lake Britton, like every other place where Canada geese hang out, their poop can be a problem. So watch where you step. We had an adventure with a pair of Canada geese when we took our walk down Burney Falls. As we walked along the creek, we saw a Canada goose out flat on its chest with its wings spread on a little grassy hummock in the middle of the creek, and another Canada goose standing by. We wrote the whole story about this poor dead Canada goose and its mourning mate. We walked the rest of the trail, turned around, and came back up. And that dead goose had moved its head around into a different position. Its completely prone position was obviously just protecting the nest and fooling big two-legged predators like us.
And that was an exciting day.
Whiteheaded woodpeckers, they like large conifers. They eat pine seeds. They also eat beetle larvae and ants and spiders. Their tapping is kind of an even drum roll, and often you find them by, as with the Canada geese, by hearing them. They're not the loudest. We'll talk about the loudest in a minute. They're dippers in the creek, also called water ouzels. These were John Muir's favorite bird. They skim low over the water of the creek. They flit from rock to rock. They have enlarged oil glands that keep their feathers safe in the spray of moving water. They eat insects and small snails or tiny fish. The cemetery trail, as we said, is a very old road that connected Burney to northern homesteads. And the trail ends at a place where a ferry took passengers across the Pitt River. 33 people were buried there between 1888 and 1990. People quit living in that area when the land was donated in the 1920s, but people who had lived there came and buried afterwards. And the first ranger appointed by the state, called a warden in the 1920s, he and his wife, who lived initially in a tent and then built a cabin, they are buried in the cemetery. A wildfire burned many of the original markers, and it now has some markers, but it also has a headstone that was put up in the 1950s that lists the burials. Most of the trail is an open conifer and oak area with ponderosa pine and white and black oak. Manzanita and other brush and grasses make for a more open area. Squirrels, lizards, deer, foxes appreciate this more open habitat, plus cavity nesting birds. Oh, yeah. So as you can see, look at those woodpecker holes in that pine tree on the left. White-breasted nuthatches and spotted towhees live in this area. The nuthatches scamper up and down the bark of the oaks and pines. They love acorns, stash them for winter use. They also appreciate pine seeds, insects, and spiders. The spotted towhees are beautiful birds. They graze among the shrubs, hopping and brushing the leaf litter, using their strong beaks to crush seeds. They like the manzanita, especially along this trail. We just had to include this. We couldn't, as we walked this trail, can you see those claw prints in the mud? Big enough to be a raven or maybe a turkey. One of the things that is really active to look at in this part of the park right now is the succession in a pine forest. Pine beetles, as you know, are a normal part of the landscape. Usually they feed the birds, and usually the sap of a healthy tree will trap the beetles before they deposit eggs. Drought and the suppression of small fires have allowed pine trees to become more dense in some areas and weakened the trees. This leads to more devastating pine beetle infestations and the death of many of the trees, and that's quite visible. Cavity nesting birds will flock to the area. But the falling of the trees, the death of the trees opens the canopy and allows in the normal progression, a stronger and more resilient forest to return. In this dry area, it may take a long time, but we expect that a healthy and diverse forest will return. This is another signature bird for this part of the area, Pileated Woodpeckers. They are jackhammers. They appreciate the beetles, and so they have been flocking to that cemetery trail area because of the dead and dying trees with the beetles. When you see the bark stripped and full of holes, as you can see in those top two pictures, you can recognize the signature of the Pileated Woodpeckers. They're normally shy, but their population has been growing in that part of the park because of the damage to the trees. They were the model for Woody Woodpecker, can you tell? Their drumming is enormously loud. It can rise and fall in pitch, and the blows are really powerful. As you can see in the top right-hand tree, how large the holes are that they can make. They also will, if the beetle grubs need supplementing, did they do seeds and berries? Peregrine Falcon, this is actually a Larry story. Larry came up looking for the Pileated Woodpeckers who managed to hide the day he was there, but found a Peregrine Falcon at the lake at the end of that cemetery trail. It goes down to another small inlet area at the lake. They're fast, they stoop, they pick their prey out of the air. They can fly incredibly high and they swoop from high up or from a high perch. They can pluck water birds right out of the water. And they also, I should say, are monogamous. We like monogamous birds. The third ecological area is Lake Britton. The lake itself is 9 miles long, 1 mile wide, formed by a dam on the Pitt River. And at the area in the park, there's a beach, a boat launch for canoes, kayaks, power boats. Near the boat launch is a lagoon that is formed where Burney Creek flows down below the falls and into the lake. The lake and the surrounding forest provide good habitat for aquatic creatures and the birds that eat them. The point at the end of the road is a good place to view the birds, as is the lower portion of that rim creek trail that leads down to the lake. Lake Britton has several pairs of bald eagles. They can almost always be seen from the cove, seen across the cove from the boat launch area. On the day that we walked around the lake, we saw them standing on the beach across the water. They looked like they were waiting for a bus. They can also be seen hunting the lake from the point at the end of the cemetery trail. They're very large birds, as you know, second only to condors in size. Fish are most of their diet, although they'll eat carrion and they'll take ducks and coots. They nest in the same trees or nearby trees for years, which is why we know you can go to the canoe launch, look across the cove, and there they are on patrol. There are also a large number of osprey. They're distinctive for those punk hairdos. They were once called fish eagles, and their diet too is almost entirely fish, but they'll eat turtles, snakes, frogs, small water birds. They're lovely to watch when they dive into the water. They often do that incredible swirling dive, striking the water feet first, and they pick their prey up out of the water with their feet. Osprey also use the same nest year after year, adding on to it and building visible nest structures. There's a large one on Highway 299 between Johnson Park and the Highway 89 turnoff to the state park. There is a new one that in the park that is visible from the road near the visitor center. It was built 2 years ago after a tree on the loop trail that had housed the osprey for years fell in a windstorm. We worried for a year, and the next spring they were back. If you ask at the visitor center, they can show you where the big osprey nest is. Bufflehead, their rounded head looked like a buffalo head to some first explorer. The males have what usually looks black and white on the back of their head, but in the right light, it flashes green and purple. They dive for small fish. They fly rapidly, and they're cavity nesters. Here are more woodpeckers. The red-breasted sapsucker are usually quieter than either the pileated or the white-breasted. They drill much more softly than the other two woodpeckers. Their holes are small and shallow, and they often return to the same tree over and over again. They like trees with sap that catches insects. They drill the hole and then they come back after the sap catches the insects. Flickers can be distinguished from other woodpeckers by their polka dots. They're loud drillers. They often make large holes for nests. They make holes that are big enough that other cavity nesters often use their large holes. They usually forage on the ground, eating ants and other small insects, but they will also eat seeds and fruits. Bullock's oriole, they migrate through here. They migrate through the park to breed, and then when the babies are hatched and sufficiently grown, they set off for Mexico or Central America in the late summer. When we walked the lakeside this time, they had not yet arrived, but the alder trees in the parking lot near the lake have several of those large, intricate pouches that you can see in the top photo here. And the oriole nests from years past. When they're there, they eat mostly insects and berries. Great blue herons, always a personal favorite, tall and elegant. They can be as tall as 4 feet. They're often seen feeding alone. They look for fish, frogs, insects, often at dawn or dusk. When they spot prey, they strike with that bill suddenly. We startled one roosting in the trees along the lagoon when we were at the lake. It flew off with a great flapping of wings and settled. And then he did it again as we walked a little further down the tree. He did it several times until finally was disgusted that we wouldn't leave him alone, and he flew across the lagoon. And predictably, they're double-crested cormorants and grebes. Pied-bill grebes can be found off the western point of the parking lot. They also can be found in the Cemetery Trail Lagoon. They're busy little divers. They like to be close to the vegetation along the shore, usually. Western grebes on the top right are larger than the pied-bill. They hang out in the middle of the lake in groups. Their long necks are used with their beaks to strike swiftly for prey. They're best seen from a boat, and there are also bank swallows that nest in the diatomaceous cliffs on the north side of the lake. And finally, cormorants, always recognizable by that uplifted chin. They fly over the water. They're distinctive. They eat small fish, and they also seem to need a really long runway for their takeoff. They have to skitter along the top. Geese and swans live on the lake. Tundra swans, as you see on the top, are occasional winter visitors. They're large and stately vegetarians. On our lakeside walk, we heard some honking and we saw the swan a long way away. When the Canada geese buzzed the lake that day, they also honked. And that swan, who looked lonesome, flew up and flew behind the Canada geese wherever they were going, along with one also lonesome greater white-fronted goose who joined the flight. Who knew that geese liked to hang out together? The swan is probably in the Arctic by now, don't you figure? Or on its way, anyway. That's it. Our walk was in February and March. Clearly, there are different birds to be seen at different times of the year. Our plan is to walk the trails each season this year to see the changes and the birds that travel through the park. We hope to see the Bullock's Orioles go fill in those nests we saw. We hope to find the Osprey and the eagle nest for this year, and we hope to see the dipper fishing in the creek and find those pileated woodpeckers. We're hoping to put a walk together in the fall, and we'd love it if you joined us.
Wow, I'd love to go on a fall bird walk up there. Yeah, that was fabulous.
Yay.
Fabulous.
Wonderful.
Well, we
Thank
have
you.
to thank Larry for a lot of the pictures that come from Larry.
That's right.
Otherwise,
That's right. We couldn't have done this without Larry. I should
Thank you,
say.
Larry. Yay, Larry.
You're very welcome. I love taking pictures of birds. So I have one question, and that is, you talked about their bank swallow holes on the other side in the diatomaceous earth. Can you see those from the shore on the Burney side?
no, you have to take a boat.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say
But
that.
one of the things we're thinking about doing is organizing boat tours so we can do bird watching on the lake.
That would be great. The other thing is that, you know, bank swallows are, I don't know if they're considered a species of special concern or something in California, but I know they're diminishing. And so there's a lot of people that are watching bank swallow nesting areas. So I'd be interested in learning more about that bank swallow. And in case there's anybody that doesn't know about this, there is a huge old bank swallow nesting area at Fall River at the Y and Fall River Mills. And I looked just the other day and there are bank swallows there now. So if you want to see some bank swallows, Fall River at the Y there in Fall River Mills is a great place. It's a very small area. It's like a half a block long. There's no blocks up there, but I mean, it's a couple 100 yards long, and there's hundreds and hundreds of holes for bank swallows. And it's actually a really small, it's a preserve, actually.
I think it's a fish and wildlife preserve. Bruce, you might know that.
I don't. But I was just looking up the status of bank swallow. They are threatened in Canada.
Ah,
And yes, I believe they are SSC, species of special concern, here in California. We always made special effort to watch for protections for bank swallows, particularly when individuals wanted to do bank protection and bank alterations on the Sacramento River, because there's a lot of habitat from Anderson south for bank swallows on the river. And it's a common practice doing riprap, doing activity along the river, from fishing access to just trying to protect your field from getting eroded, that bank swallows can be at risk.
yeah, I was just going to mention the riprap issue, and that's probably one of the main reasons that bank swallows are now species of special concern, which, for those of you that don't know, doesn't really mean anything. It gives them no protection whatsoever, because burrowing owls are also a species of special concern. So,
Well, it gives them, I know it gives them protection under California Environmental Quality Act, because at least we always, at Fish and Wildlife, we always determined that gave them status as a species that needed to be protected in concert with development proposals when California Environmental Quality Act was at issue. But if it's a federal project, they don't pay any attention, no. Federal agencies do not have to protect species that are state species of special concern.
Good
Big
information.
hole in the ESA.
Thank you for that, Bruce.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any more questions?
Well, just
I'd like
to
to
Jen-
repeat that this program is available when, Dan, tomorrow on YouTube? The whole slide.
It'll probably be tomorrow because it takes my slow computer access. It takes a long time for them to be uploaded to YouTube. So I always tell people tomorrow it'll be available on our YouTube. You can just check Wind to Audubon on YouTube and you can find it.
What a wonder. I had no idea there were so many beautiful, colorful birds in February and March up there. Thank you, Catherine and Jackie. You did a great job. Wonderful.
Love the
Larry.
pictures. Love the pictures of the pileated woodpeckers. They're a favorite of mine too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bruce, obviously you don't know the backstory to that, and that is that I've been trying to get decent
Oh, I
photos of
do.
pileated woodpeckers for years. And I go up to Jackie's place and we're looking for pileated woodpeckers, and we finally find one because it's probably 100 yards from her house or less. And it's hammering is so loud that you can't hear anything else. And it took us a long time to find it, and then it flew away before I could get a picture. C'est la vie, huh?
Yeah.
We still have a pair
Pileated
hanging around here. We discovered the other day, Larry, that what we thought was a mated pair that was frequenting our area is actually, I don't know what you would call it, a pod, a COVID pod of pileated woodpeckers. There's 3 or 4 of them. And actually at one point, 2 or 3 showed up together at our bird feeder.
Wow.
Or in the tree next to our bird feeder.
Are they attracted to water bodies, the pileateds? Do they have to be near water typically?
Not really.
I don't think so.
I hadn't noticed that anyway.
No, they nest up there at Lost Creek Campground, which is where we're going to hold our annual. I didn't mention that before, did we? We have our annual picnic coming up June 18th, 19th, 20th at Lost Creek Camp. It's posted in the email I sent out, and I will post it on the website. But don't forget about that. There's pileated woodpeckers that nest right there, and people always see them in the campground when I'm not in the campground. So.
You see this woodpecker?
What's that?
Right here. It's in my willow
Yeah.
here. And there's babies.
That's-
If you listen, can you hear the baby woodpecker?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh.
They sound like
It's
crickets.
on the outside. Did you see the?
They're-
That's cool.
That's an acorn woodpecker.
That
Mary?
is.
It's the dad is black and white, or the mom and the dad's got the red neck. But this is all the sawdust that they dug. I mean, there's just sawdust everywhere. And they have super strong necks. But anyways, I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
It's in my front yard.
You need to be
That's great.
vaccinated.
Larry,
I've never heard.
Larry, I hesitate to ever invite you here to Oregon because I don't want our pileated woodpeckers to go away.
Yeah, they'll disappear if I show up.
Hey, do we need to be vaccinated to go on the camp jamboree in June?
No, you don't need to be vaccinated for that. That's open to everybody. it's, but because it's all out in the open, we're out in the open all the time. So basically you could just stay 6 feet apart up there. It's my personal bird walks that are coming up that I want people to be vaccinated because I don't have to worry about that. Hopefully that answers.
All right, and yeah. And so